Dr. John Jackson, and my voice today is about police brutality in America, specifically recent police brutality in Black America. The police and Black Americans, I'm going to use the word Negro today, Negro Americans, our relationship has always been adversarial. And if you look at America's history, go back to 1619, at that time in American history, we weren't even human beings. And then you come up to the slavery, go through slavery, get to Pre-Construction. In 1866, that's when America started trying to make us human beings. And the police were the gatekeepers of the abuse that was focused on Black people. During the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, it was no big deal for the police to shoot a Black person, murder a Black person while in custody of the police, take a Black person to jail and kill him or her, and nothing would happen. And then in the 50s, as the civil rights movement started to gain footage, America started making laws to give us protection against the police. The police, law enforcement, has always been the enemy of Black people. They have never treated us with respect. They never had to. We didn't have civil and or human rights. We were supposed to be happy that they allowed us to exist. So in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, when civil rights became our way of letting them know that we weren't being treated right and we weren't going to take it anymore, they became very violent against us, and the United States government, and I'm talking about the Congress, the Senate, the state legislatures, county supervisors, city councilmen, and mayors were all in agreement to let the police do whatever they could to stop the Negroes from trying to acquire their civil rights. It's not surprising to me that our relationship today with the police is what it is, because they have been afforded the privilege of doing whatever they want to us for a few hundred years. We come to the 1960s where we actually started to protest and march, and at that time in the 1960s, we did have permission to create civil disobedience. Today, that right has been taken away. We no longer have the right to protest. You have to get a permit from our masters if you want to protest. You can't just gather a group of people, go out and protest. That's all over. But in the 60s, we could do that. But that also exposed us to extreme danger. And I'm talking about terror, mayhem, and murder. The police were able to arrest us, take us to jail in droves, trump up charges, and if they wanted to, work in complicity with the KKK and kill us and do whatever they want to. So the police brutality problem in America is not new. It's been going on since 1866. That's after the Civil War. And during that era, we went through a period in American history called peonage. That's when all of those Black code laws were written, and they were specifically written for Negro Americans. It was against the law to be a vagrant. You couldn't walk on the sidewalk in the city. You couldn't be in the city limits. You couldn't be in the city if you didn't have a job. It was against the law to walk on the roadways, and 90% of the Negroes didn't have a car or a mule or a wagon, so they had to walk. So they started arresting all of these people in this peonage era, and they started bonding them out to people who used to be their slave masters. And the people that were doing this is law enforcement, the justice of the peace, and judges. So as I tell this story, you can see that we never really expected much from the police or law enforcement or the criminal justice system, and they expected us to take whatever they dished out. Well, after peonage, the civil rights movement really took hold. And that's when Dr. King came along. We had the march across the Pettus Bridge in Alabama. All these things were happening, but we were subjected to absolute violence, being beaten with sticks that were wrapped in barbed wire like we were animals. And everybody in America saw it, and the only reason there was a reaction to it at all was America became ashamed because Europe could see that America had been lying to Europe and the rest of the world for all that time. Our government has never cared about a Negro getting his brains blown out, being killed while in custody of the police, being abused or beaten while being arrested. They didn't care. There was a case in Rhode Island. There was a young man in Rhode Island that killed a cop. And when he came to court, he was beaten so badly, he had to have a mask on. The police put a mask on him to hide his injuries. They said they put the mask on him to protect him from the people in the courtroom, spitting on them and stuff like that. But this man was beaten nearly to death by the police. The Justice Department investigated, and they found no wrongdoing. Every time the police does something, and our laws and the people who are supposed to be protecting us do not protect us, anarchy is moving closer. If you have something happening to you, and the very people that are supposed to be protecting you are not protecting you or causing you harm, anarchy is coming. Now, every time a cop kills a black man, there's a grand jury inquiry. Nothing is charged. The officer is not charged. He's found to be within the standards and the guidelines. Well, my answer to that is there must be something wrong with the guidelines if a cop can shoot a guy like the officer did in Ferguson at 30 feet away and not go to jail. That can't be allowed. So when we keep having incident after incident where this is happening, you have the guy in New York City get choked to death on camera. Then you have the guy in Tulsa, Oklahoma, get shot in the back by an old geezer who should have been at home sitting in his rocking chair out trying to play the police because he's bought his way into the police department by giving them cars and donating money because he had money to waste. Why in the world would anybody in their right mind allow a 73-year-old man to be out trying to do police when the cutoff age for becoming a policeman, I think it's 32 years old or 35. So why would you allow that? Because he had money. He has money and he bought his way. And the other thing is, how can these officers keep making the mistake of pulling a taser when a taser is a lot lighter than a weapon? I'm used to weapons. There's no way that you can't tell the feel of a taser. And I was once a peace officer from that of a gun. He pulled it, shot the man to death. That was bad enough. I will give him credit. Maybe it was an accident. I don't think that he's just a cold-blooded murder, but I still think he needs to go to prison. But what his co-workers said, the man said that I've been shot. One of the officers said you shouldn't have fucking run. He said I cannot breathe. One of the officers said we don't care about your fucking breath. So their attitude was, you ran from us, and whatever we want to do to you after you run, whether you have a gun or not, we can do it. And my question to the American people, how long are we going to allow this type of behavior to go on? Because the more we allow it to go on, we're headed toward anarchy. And when you have anarchy, a lot of innocent people will die. We have young black men in this country, and brown men and some white men, who will no longer accept the police murdering and shooting up their relatives. What are you going to do? Wait until you push or force someone to retaliate against the police so you can say, I told you they were violent? The police are the ones that are creating the violence. My solution to the problem is that we need legislation. We need the people that we elect and send to Washington to do something other than sit on their butts and feud with each other and do nothing. We need legislation out of Washington, D.C., and I'm talking about the Congress and the Senate, to pass laws that control when an officer can pull and fire a weapon. In order for an officer to use and fire a weapon, there should be a weapon in the perpetrator's hand. They shouldn't be allowed to say he had a pear knife or he was reaching for a gun. Anytime you hear an officer say, I shot him because he was reaching for a gun, and it's a minority, you have a lying, dishonest murderer on your hand. Very few black men, brown men, lower socioeconomic white men would reach for a gun or simulate reaching for a gun when they don't have a weapon. They know that is suicide. And the number of black men that have been shot by cops who said they had a gun or he was reaching for a gun or I feared for my life, but his back would turn to them. You have dishonest murderers walking around free. We have got to make sure that the Congress and the Senate send a federal bill out holding these law enforcement officers accountable in training as to when they can pull up and fire a weapon on another human being. In Arizona the other week, we had a police officer who was a bad cop in New York City pull up in his car and run over another human being. And he said that he felt that he had to take an action. That's not the craziest story I've heard. I read about a case in Stockton, California. Heard it on the news also. They had a young lady named Mitzi Singh, had the unfortunate accident of being in a bank that was being robbed by some criminals. I'll give them that. And they kidnapped 3 people. 2 of them escaped. What happened after that was the police, after they were shot at, fired 600 rounds into a car where they knew Miss Singh was in that car. In other words, they executed her. And the police chief, Jones, said his officers didn't have any other choice. What I want to educate him myself. His officers did have other options. They could have disengaged and backed off and found the perpetrators later. I would feel much better if Miss Singh had been shot to death by one of the bank robbers rather than 600 rounds being fired into the vehicle she was in by the police, and then have the chief be dumb enough to say on TV in front of camera that they didn't have any other options. Police, they're training. They are trained to be aggressive. And what they do more than anything is they escalate violence and they perpetrate violence because they feel that it's their duty to bring an incident to closure. And if you are being talked to by them and you don't do what they say, their option and only option is to escalate because they feel that they have to win. They are trained that they have to end whatever situation they come to and that they have to win it. They are never trained like the rest of America that it's okay to de-escalate and back down. Their psychic is that they have to win. And if killing someone in order to prove that they won is the outcome, they don't care. They don't care if the person is mentally ill. They have been called many times and said, we have a family member, he's mentally ill, she's mentally ill. They have shot that person to death knowing that they are mentally ill. Not in the leg, sent a mass. What we need, as I said earlier, is legislation from Washington, from the Congress and the Senate, from state legislatures, from city councilmen, and from mayors to stop this slaughter. They must have guidelines come all the way down from Washington to tell police officers when they can pull up their weapon and fire it. There must be a weapon in the perpetrator's hands before the officer can shoot to kill. They can't say something stupid like, I feared for my life. If you're a coward, get out of police work. Or he was reaching for a gun and they don't ever find a gun. We can no longer accept that. We have got to start prosecuting cops who kill American citizens and claim that they were reaching for a gun and there was no gun. With that being said, after this training, then we'll see a culture change in the police. First of all, we're going to have to start sending them to jail for what they're doing. They claim that they have to shoot to kill. They don't have to. There was an officer on TV the other day, and a man was trying to make him kill him. Now, he should have shot his gun before he allowed this man to walk up on him, but they are so trained to shoot center mass, he didn't shoot. He could have shot him in the leg. The guy wouldn't take his hand. The guy walked up on him. He was so brainwashed by having to think that he had to shoot to kill that he couldn't even bring himself to shoot him in the leg, which would have been right. So they're psychic. Their mindset is they have to kill you if they shoot at you. And that has to change. We have FBI agents, CIA agents, all of them are trained to kill. And we got to stop it. And if we don't start hearing from our local politicians, I'm talking about the mayors, the city councilmen, the county supervisors in particular in Sacramento, because they are paying out a lot of money at the Sacramento County Jail for what's going on in the Sheriff Department. And my message is to Mr. Cerner. I believe he's the chairman of the Board of Supervisors in Sacramento. Why haven't you been more outspoken about what's going on at the Sacramento County Jail? Or are you afraid you won't be reelected? If you keep acting the way you are, you just might not be, because they have had neglect that resulted in death. They have had 4 officers take a man's life who was in a wheelchair because they were too lazy to control him. They tasered him until he died. We are going to have to change this scenario. The other thing I want to talk about, and it's a real problem. How many of you out there have been stopped by a cop and you couldn't see his feet for his gut? He was fat, overweight, and when you get a job as a peace officer, one of the requirements for getting the job is that you must remain physically fit. That means that your body mass index, the BMI, has to match your height. We have probably 60%, 70% of the law enforcement officers in the United States of America are overweight, and an overweight officer is not going to give chase long. He's going to get tired quickly, and then he'll pull up his gun or his taser and he'll start doing things that he normally wouldn't do because he's not physically fit. That's the other law that needs to come down from the Senate and the Congress. If you're going to be a police officer in America, one of the primary functions is that you must remain physically fit. That is not happening. And in a lot of the agencies, they are being paid to stay physically fit. I don't understand what the problem is. If you can fire a person in other areas in America for not being in shape, why can't the police do it? Why do we have to allow these people who are supposed to be serving and protecting us not remain physically fit? It's their duty. If we get these laws, and they come from Washington down, you will immediately see a change in the culture of law enforcement. There are a lot of good officers, but what's going on by the bad officers is superseding any good that they might do, because we can't trust the police now. And it doesn't matter now pretty much which color you are. If the police encounter you, you are in danger, and that should never be the case. Now, if you're black or brown, driving from my house to the store can be a problem, because if you encounter the police, they had a bad day, you had a bad day, something bad could happen, because they are not trained to disengage. And that's one of the key things that they need to learn, is how to disengage. They are not our masters anymore. They act like they are. The police believe that any words that they speak to a black man, that he should follow them. And now they are willing to kill you if you don't follow their rabbit instructions. They're just barking them at you. Get down, roll over, put your hands behind you. Whatever it is, they want you to do it right now. And we have to teach our young men still today. You know, when the cop stops you, keep your hand on the steering wheel. When he asks for your driver's license or your registration, tell him they're in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach over there and get them and give them to you. We shouldn't have to live like this. We shouldn't have to teach our young men and our young women to be afraid of law enforcement. We are paying them. We shouldn't have to pay for people who continue to mistreat us. Now, as I always say when I do presentations, I'm not suggesting that anyone take up violence against the police. But what I am saying is that if you are a black male and you have a clean record, there are a few of you out there, I have a clean record, and you can buy you a gun, you better get you one, because you might need it. Get you a gun. You know, I'm not telling you to join the NRA, because that's a racist organization. They don't represent what you want. One other thing I want to talk about today is the militia groups that are forming in America that are white racist militia groups. Our government is running all over the world trying to stop insurgents, militias, alleged terrorists. And right here in America right now, we have militias in practically every state. They're white, and they are armed to the teeth, and they are racist. And our government is allowing these people to exist. The militias should have become illegal after the Civil War. As most of you know who have heard me speak, that's my favorite war. I loved it. The only thing I hate about it is it didn't last long enough. It's the only time in American history where you got a true feeling of what was going on in America. You had two sides, the North and the South, both racist to the core, killing off each other because they wanted to control us. And it showed itself in the 1919, they call them blood wars. All of the blacks that left the South and headed north, the Negroes, they encountered absolute racial bigotries. And I'm talking about as far as New York and as far out west as California. They didn't want us either. I mean, absolute violence. There was violence, and the KKK used to have headquarters in Indiana. You know, that's why they passed that crazy law. They had headquarters in Indiana, and they were as violent as ever. What we have to do again is we need legislation. We need it from Washington. We need it from our state houses. We need it from our local city councilmen. We need to hear it from our mayors, or we need to re-elect someone or elect someone who is willing to face this problem. Our state legislatures in California, they've been numb on this. They'll come out and say something when something happened, like what happened in Fullerton, or 2 cops are killed in San Francisco. They'll talk for a minute, but they'll never produce any legislation to stop this slaughter. We want to see a society where no matter your race, your socioeconomic status, we want to see a society where everybody can go and drive and feel safe without fearing the police every time you see a red and blue light. And we have that right, and we pay taxes, and we pay the ones that are harassing us, and we want it to stop. And we want it to stop now. This is my voice. If you listen to it today, go take it up with your politicians, national and at state level and in the cities. They are going to have to be the ones that force the police to stop murdering black people. If they don't do it, it's not going to happen. I'm calling on you, all of you. Mass protests, boycotts, don't shop. Whatever you can do, do your part. But don't accept any form of discrimination. You have that right. Again, this is Dr. Jackson. This is my voice, and I'm honored to have talked to you today. Thank you.